Hello, my name is Olivia Holmes and I teach medieval studies at Binghamton University.
And I'm Véronique Plesch, and I teach art history at Colby College, where, by the way, many years ago, Olivia and I taught a couple of times a two-course cluster on the Divine Comedy. Olivia was talking about the text, and I talked about the art at that time. So it's great to be back together talking about Dante.
Yes, it is. And today we'll be talking about Purgatorio 19.
And yeah, since you are the literary person here, Olivia, why don't you tell us what happens in that canto?
I would be happy to. So this is a transitional canto. Dante is moving up to another section of Purgatory and a new subset of sins. The top three sins are all forms of love for inappropriate objects, earthly goods. This canto has the avaricious, after which we come to the canto of gluttony and then lust. At the beginning of the canto, Dante is asleep and he has a dream. It's just before dawn when dreams are supposed to be prophetic, and he has there is an apparition of a stuttering, cross-eyed, crippled, sickly woman who becomes beautiful under his gaze, comme amour vuole, as love desires. And then this stuttering woman is given the ready tongue of a sweet siren. She begins to sing, and in her song she claims she is the siren that turned Ulysses from his path and satisfied all his desires. This is a problematic claim for her to make because, of course, the siren didn't turn Ulysses from his path. There may be some conflation here with Circe. And then after that, the siren is displaced by a holy woman. Another woman appears. She's described as Santa e Presta, and she rips off the siren's clothing, although there's some ambiguity in the text. It's possible that it's actually Virgil that's ripping off the siren's clothing. Her abdomen is revealed, and a stink comes out of it and wakes the sleeper. Virgil subsequently tells Dante that he saw quella antica strega, the ancient witch that is lamented above them in the subsequent cantos, in the cantos of avarice and gluttony and lust. Dante gets up, they continue on their journey. In the second half of the canto, they encounter the avaricious, who are face down on the pavement, and Dante encounters Pope Adrian V, who tells him that he is there because he converted late. He realized the futility of earthly desires only after he had become Pope, interestingly, and only at that point he turned to God. Dante kneels down to him. The Pope tells him he should not kneel, he should get up because all earthly offices and honors are dissolved in the afterlife. So, Véronique, what important themes or motifs did you notice in this canto?
So I really saw two that are in fact going to really play in our reading of this canto, how it kind of echoes today. So one is visuality, and the other is the opposition of movement and stasis. So first of all, obviously it's a vision, right? It's a dream that appears as a vision. It's very visual, and yet it appears within a visionary poem. So there's lots of visual cues, that starting with the woman who appears, and Dante say, "Io la mirava." Then the people who are turned down, who can't see, right? Because their face is towards the ground, and therefore there's the absence of sight, which is so important in the conception of purgatory, right? Which is people who are hoping to eventually be able to see God face to face. So we can think a little bit about the whole question of the dream as a contemplative object, right? The poem is in a way so visual, so material, so real, that it's trying to, as we once said in a paper we did together, as a kind of condescension, right? Trying to make it, to convey to the viewer the true nature of the afterlife, which is ineffable and indescribable. And yet Dante kind of presents those metaphors that are approximations. And we can think about the function of visual objects in devotional practices, how they're necessary, and yet they're mere approximations for something that is beyond material and sensorial, earthly and sensorial experience. And then, so there's movement and stasis, which again is fundamental to the whole project of the Commedia, right? Starting with the declaration that the life is a camine. The pilgrim is dreaming of that trip. And yet, in this particular canto, it's a dream. So it's a dream within that whole.
It's a pause within an ongoing motion. And,
exactly.
and
so
we notice a lot of, as you said, visual and directional cues and up and down motion, especially in the second half of the canto. After the dream, Virgil tells Dante, "Surgi e vieni," arise, get up, and he tells him to not look down at the pavement as he's walking. He's supposed to look up. Dante climbs up to the 5th terrace where the avaricious are all facing down. And, you know, with their bottoms up to God, which is undignified and disrespectful. And Dante, to show respect, gets down on his knees, and the Pope tells him, no, get up. So there's all this up and down movement.
That's right. Yeah, so we have two things going on. One is that movement of pilgrimage is positive, right? We have the idea of the transformational dimension of pilgrimage, perhaps the equation between physical movement and spiritual movement.
Right.
The movement of purgation, you move through purgatory. And as you were saying, in those further, there's so many positional and directional cues, and we really understand that either through the direction of the gaze or the direction of the body, even the static body, there's an opposition between up, that's positive, and down, that is negative. So that,
and also there's this, you need to stop in order to like in order to make true spiritual movement, you have to cease your physical movement for a bit and contemplate what the truth is. So how does this relate to us today? Why are we interested in this canto? What do you think?
The first thing you said, you need to stop in order to contemplate, right? To reflect, provided you're looking in the right direction. I think we already get there, the nexus of those two ideas.
Not at the stammering woman, but at the holy lady, right?
Right. So
and also there's this, I mean, obviously it has to do with our lives in quarantine and the fact that we're actually stuck. And this is an opportunity. It could be a contemplative moment or it could be a waste of time. But also it relates to our sequestered lives and our fixation on screens, our phones, our computers, social media, and so forth. And the notion of the difference between images, facsimiles, false images of the good and the real thing, right? So we're beguiled by fake news and we're beguiled by, images of what we desire, but we lack real human contact, right? And so I was very struck that in the dream, the true nature of the siren is revealed not by what her visual image, but by her smell, right? That's this true physical contact.
It's something. Right? It's something underneath. You have to kind of peel
away and understand where the truth lies. So you were talking about that opposition between the monastic ideal, right,
Well, yeah,
contemplation.
well, but that's where it becomes problematic, because so far, when we think about movement and stasis, we've seen that if we want to simplify things, movement is positive. There's the movement of the pilgrimage that redeems. There's the movement of the souls within purgatory that, purge their sins. And yet, in the thought of the time for Dante, I mean, there is. And thinking back about us today, right? We're in confinement. We are in a situation that thinking about the opposition of movement and stasis, we are in a situation of stasis. And yet there is a positive stasis, the positive confinement, and that is the monastic ideal, because it allows for contemplation, right? You stay put, sometimes in some orders you even stay silent, but confinement can become negative when we are subjected to false images. If you think about Plato's caverns, when people are stuck in a place and what they see is a mere reflection, a distorted reflection of reality back to us, right? The confinement can be a time for contemplation, for thinking back. It's been a time that has allowed even the earth to breathe better with what we've observed in terms of the environment. And yet, as we're stuck, we are like Plato's prisoners, subjected. Our only image we see from reality is mediated and therefore can be fake. And it is often fake. It is, fake news.
I think it's worth bringing up some of Dante's sources, because I think it helps us understand what's going on in this canto. So I think one of the main sources for the dream is the opening scene in Boethius's Constellation of Philosophy, in which Lady Philosophy descends from heaven and dispels the muses of poetry, she accuses of being strumpets, and she accuses of captivating the speaker with their seductive wiles. And I think that there's this pattern of noble lady expelling meretricious rivals and curing the suitor by telling him what the truth is. Scholars have referred to this scene in Boethius as Stoic psychotherapy, right? So the protagonist realizes the true nature of earthly goods and learns not to desire them. Okay, so what's going on in this canto is also, in the dream especially, is a dramatization of the theory of sin and desire that Dante's been putting forward at the center of Purgatory. He over the course of several cantos, he talks about love as an instinctual bending towards the good, but that we turn to what amuses us or what attracts us, but curbs need to be set. Not all every love is praiseworthy. We need to distinguish false images of the good from truth. And the expelling at the end of the canto, in which the Holy Lady expels the other lady, also recalls something that takes place in both classical and medieval medical treatises, as well as in literary sources, and the notion of a vilification cure. That is, love is conceived as a sickness, it has symptoms, and one of the way that you can cure someone of their fixation on an object is by exposing its true nature. So, for example, Ovid in his Remedia Amoris jokingly suggests smelling the beloved's menstrual pads or contemplating the defects of an ugly old woman. So another thing that occurs to me in the current cultural context is that there is a certain hidden racism and even ableism perhaps in this dream, this notion that we're going to reveal the true nature of something by attributing ugliness to it. And the attributes of ugliness are attributes of people who are not like us. So another source that Dante's drawing on here is a vision in the Lives of the Desert Fathers, in which a monk contemplates he's beset by carnal desire, and so he has a vision in which this smelly and ugly Etiopessa, a black woman, appears to him and tells him she's the spirit of fornication. And so again, there's this problematic thing going on.
Very complicated, because if you think about the whole idea of the vilification as a cure, and back to what happens in that canto, where you have a certain appearance and you peel the layers, and actually another sensorial stimuli reveals the true nature, right? The beautiful outside, but once you open it up, stench is revealed. But even the idea of vilification, it used to be, I mean, it can be used as a cure, as a way of getting maybe to the truth. But it's a manipulation in one way. It's because you want to get over your ex that you're going to only focus on the negative, which transposed today can really make you think about what happens in what I can't even call political discourse, because I don't see real discourse more than manipulative rhetoric, where vilification is absolutely gigantic. But interestingly, what we kind of learned from those love cures is that it is based on reality. It is based on a shred of reality, right? You have the menstrual pad of your ex, and yet you are twisting it, and that's where it becomes so dangerous.
I think that what comes up here is the notion of ethical choices, which is so important. I mean, what's being depicted in the canto is free will. Free will, making rational choices and distinguishing between false images of the good and the true good, right? So here we are in our current state of life, in which we are forced into this contemplative life, whether we want it or not. And we need to understand, we need to make choices. We need to understand what are the true praiseworthy objectives and what is merely immediate gratification. So, what is good for us in the long run? When we come out of this quarantine, what do we need to do that is not just running after, earthly desires, but is, taking into consideration. And I'm thinking about things like climate change and racial relations and education, making sure we have an informed electorate, and so forth.
And there's the lessons we could learn from what has happened. I mean, things have been, as we were saying, even the environment has we've seen what has been changed. Will we go back to where we were before? And more specifically, considering this canto, since we met people who are there because of avarice. There's the whole idea of profit and greed for Dante and thinkers of the time as the source of all sins. And so as we reopen the economy, are we going to do that no matter what, even though we might be aware of serious health risks? And even going earlier into the history of what we've experienced with the pandemic, people hoarding toilet paper and hand sanitizer to resell for profit, right? Regardless of the fact that they're depriving others. So in a way, there's also the simple idea, Dante's idea that avarice extinguishes love.
And that truth is in some sense a cure. And on that note, let us say goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.